everybody, let's talk about unit conversions today. So consider Raston Tower over at Ariel Foundation Park. The tower is 280 feet tall. Although for the record, the part that you climb to the top of the observation deck is only at about 170 feet. But the tower is really tall. It's 280 feet tall. But what if we don't want to talk about how tall it is in terms of feet? We can talk about it in terms of yards. 280 feet is about 93 yards. We could also talk about it in terms of how many meters tall it is, 85 meters. So we've got three different numbers, 280, 93, and 85. The numbers are different because they have different units. They still represent the same object and the same height. Often as we're doing science, we're going to find that we want to talk about a measurement using multiple units. And so we're going to need to be able to convert back and forth from one unit to another. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Okay, so here's the core. In order to convert between units, you have to know how the two different units are related to one another. So I know that there are 3 feet and 1 yard, and so that allows me to convert between feet and yards. Similarly, I know that in a meter, there are, I have to look at it, 3.28 feet in every 1 meter. And those relationships between the measurements allows me to do the conversions. Actually doing the conversion, there's 2 different ways to go about this. Mathematically, they are equivalent. You will get the same answers. But you can either use a proportion method, which some people really like because you've used proportions in math, or you can use what's called dimensional analysis. I'm going to show you both, and then I'm going to ask you to pick one method and stick with it. So let's do a conversion. Let's convert 3 miles to feet. Okay, again, to start you have to know the relationship between your units. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So there's my relationship. Now, if I do this conversion using proportions, here's the way it's going to look when we go to set it up. I'm going to start with what it is I want to know. So I want to know how many feet are in 3 miles. And so I basically set up a fraction to be the left side of my proportion that says how many feet are in the known quantity, in this case the miles. And then the other side of the proportion, the other fraction part, is the relationship. And I know that there's 5,280 feet for every 1 mile. So as you look at this setup, one side is what the question is, and the other side is the relationship. And when you're setting a proportion, just make sure that you have the same units in the numerator that you have on both sides and the same units in the denominator on both sides. And then once you have a proportion set up, then you just solve for it. You cross multiply and solve for x. The other way to set up this problem is using what's called dimensional analysis. So for dimensional analysis, the setup's going to look a little different. I call it the train tracks. And basically you're going to set up kind of a T-chart. And in the top left spot, you're going to put the number that's in the question, what you're going to be converting. And then you don't put anything over underneath it. It's basically over 1. And then to the right, you're going to put your relationship. And for this one, the unit you want goes on top, and the unit you have goes on the bottom in that relationship. So let's label this. So here you're going to start with your starting value on the left. The second portion is going to be your relationship. Now, when you're doing dimensional analysis, the key here is that the units have to alternate. So since the unit was miles in the numerator in that first part that had the question, I need to put the miles on the bottom so that they will cancel out and I'll have feet on top. The reason dimensional analysis works is because with that relationship you're multiplying by 1. And for either of these, now that they're set up, now you just do the math to solve them. So for the proportion one, you're going to cross multiply and solve for x. For the dimensional analysis one, you are going to multiply all the numbers that are in the numerator of your train tracks and divide by any numbers that's in the denominator. And when you do this, you'll get the same answer for both of them. And this is 1,840 feet. That's the number that comes out. With significant figures, you started with 2, you get 2 significant figures. And so this is 1,600 feet for your final answer, and that is for both versions. So at this time, what I'm going to ask you to do is pick a method. And when you go to look at some more examples of me doing this, I want you to pick the video that's for the method you have chosen. That way you're not having to listen to both of them and getting yourselves confused. So if proportions, when I talked about it, kind of made sense because you've seen proportions in math, go find the proportions video for the examples and watch those and see how they work and make sure it's making sense, because I'll spend some time talking it through and breaking it down more. If dimensional analysis made more sense to you because for some reason proportions aren't your thing, go find the dimensional analysis video and I'm going to talk you through more details of all of that. And find the one that makes sense and make sure by the time you're done watching the videos that it makes sense. And that's the one that you'll stick with as we work throughout this school year. Okay, go take a look at those videos and we'll talk more in class and give you plenty of chances to practice.